Straight to Serie A action. Well, we're coming to the conclusion of the 2023-2024 season, right? And it's definitely not what we saw in the 2022-2023 season. Because now Inter Milan are the runaway leaders, just like Napoli did last season. They were the runaway leaders. So with Napoli, they've just fallen off the pace completely. And AC Milan is still battling their way just to finish in second place. Juventus is slowly slipping down. Oh man, what a game that was between Lazio and Juventus. What a game there was. What a game there was, man. The game between Lazio and Juventus was what a game that was. I mean, with the last kick of the game, Lazio literally scored. Last kick, last second of the game, Lazio scored a header. But we'll get into that one. Let's get into the drama that took place at the Diego Armando Maradona Stadium in Naples. The game between Napoli and Atalanta. So, the game resulted in a 3-0 victory for the away side, the Atalanta, and it resulted in the fact that Napoli fans were so furious. They were so furious. Sorry for laughing, but the Napoli fans were so furious that they even booed their own players after a heavy defeat at home to Atalanta, right? You could tell that the Napoli fans, they just could not hide their frustration in that 3-0, humiliation to Atalanta. And, they vehemently, booed their players after the final whistle. And it was another game to forget for the defending Serie A champions, who suffered a heavy home defeat against direct rivals Atalanta on Saturday. And again, the visitors, look at how the game went by, right? The visitors scored twice in the first half, through Aleski, Miranchuk, as well as Gianluca, Scamacca, while TS Coupe Miners, bagged the third in the second half after coming off the bench as a substitute. And the Stadio Maradona was sold out, and even though many supporters left before the final whistle, the remaining crowd, heavily booed their players at the end of the game. And rightfully so. I cannot blame them. You cannot fault them whatsoever because it was a dismal showing from Napoli. Dismal showing. Because Napoli, they have had 3 coaches this season. Rudy Garcia, Walter Mazzari, as well as Francesco Calzona. However, results have been very poor for all of them. And the Partenope, have earned 45 points in 30 matches this season. And they currently sit in 7th in the Serie A. 9 points below the Champions League placement table. Literally, guys. So that's how bad things have that's how bad things are for Napoli this season. Things are that bad because you look at the fact that Atalanta got on track, and it was a completely dominant display from Atalanta. Winning 3-0 to the defending away from home to the defending champions. It's massive. The goals that were scored by Aleski, Miranchuk, Gianluca, Scamacca, and Tien Koopmeiners, those were brilliant goals. And remember now also Napoli, however, they did hit the upright twice, right? And it's worth noting that both teams had problems after, players returned from international duties, with injuries to, Kvichka, Kvaratskhelia, as well as Charles, Charles de Catalare, who missed out as well, with Tien Koopmeiners not past, fit to start. And Victor Osimhen, shook off this clash, for European places, And Ladia, were coming off 2 points from 4 Serie A games. But, their last round was postponed after, Fiorentina director, Joe Baron's heart attack, which resulted in his demise. However, and, condolences to the Fiorentina director, condolences to his family, during this difficult time, and condolences to the, Fiorentina family, the players, the coaching staff, the fans, everybody. And it literally just took 2 minutes for Atalanta to go very close to an opening goal. That's how the game started. They started like a house on fire. It was actually Aleski Miranchuk who ran onto a Mario, Pasalic slide rule, pass. And his snooker shot, beat Alex Meret, only to bounce off the base of the far post. And then Osimhen's diving header, didn't actually have enough power to surprise, Marco, Neshki, in the Atalanta goal. But Atalanta, they took the lead rather in, chaotic fashion. Basically, it was against the run of play. That's how they took the lead, against the run of play. It was so chaotic. We saw former Chelsea right back, David Zappacosta's cross, from the left was nodded on both, Hans Hateboer and then Gianluca Zamaka. Then Pasalic's scuff volley turned into an assist for Miranchuk to tap in from close range. It was just a whole lot of things that were happening. A whole lot of things were happening in order for that ball to finally go into the back of the net. And the host, wanted, to actually... The host wanted it to be disallowed for a push on Amir, Ramani, but it was actually not strong enough, and, that was a great call by VAR. And Napoli as well, they had a double opportunity to actually find the equalizer soon after. It was actually Osimhen who sprung the offside trap, and Karaneski, came off flying to parry his legs. And parry with his legs, I meant to say. That was a great, goalkeeping effort, super goalkeeper. And then, Giorgio, Scalvini, then cleared Matteo Politano's follow-up practically off the line. And then moments later, Meret, had to do even better with the double rush off his line to push the ball off the feet of Pasalic and then Sead Kolasinac. Remember Sead Kolasinac, the former Arsenal midfielder. From that particular moment in time, you thought that Napoli, had the momentum to get the equalizer. But, Atalanta added another blow. They added another blow because they doubled their lead on the stroke of halftime. It was actually Scamacca's high press on Juan Jesus that actually proved effective. He combined with Miranchuk, to fire into the far bottom corner from outside the box. And to be honest, man, from that particular moment in time, the response from Napoli was emphatic. It was great. Because, yes, they were 2-0 down, but the response once again was actually great because, there was an extraordinary double opportunity for Napoli on 54 minutes. As the first, the ferocious, Priko Zielinski's left-footed volley, smashed the inside of the far post. Then it came back to, Stanislav, Labotka, whose finish was deflected off Osimhen. And from that particular moment in time, you're like, why is Napoli struggling just to find that equalizing goal? Because we saw Stanislav, Labotka, whose finish, was deflected off Osimhen, and then Karaneski, scrambled across to fingertip it with a header onto the upright. And then Giorgio, Scalvini injured himself while making a decisive tackle to stop Jesper Lindstrom going clear on goal from Osimhen's flick. And it's like Napoli were really struggling, man. They were, the momentum was on their side. You could tell that they really were pushing to actually at least get that consolation, but it was just not their day. Because now Meret, had to use his trailing hand to actually palm away, Miranchuk, his effort from the edge of the box, and then did the same with Ademola Lookman. Karaneski, also had to be on high alert, with two tough saves on Osimhen, one using his foot and then the other on a scorching half volley. And just as Napoli were pushing their hardest, man, Atalanta added another blow. And this was basically the final blow. Atalanta then scored the third goal on the counter-attack. It was actually the Dutch substitute, Koop Miners, who completed a given goal with Matteo Ruggeri and then held off, Juan Jesus to actually place his precise, snooker shot of a finish into the far bottom corner. And this practically sends any residual, hopes of Napoli, qualifying for Champions League next season because, they were loudly jeered off the field at the final whistle, and rightfully so. There's no way Napoli are going to qualify for the Champions League. Their Champions League hopes are over. Honestly speaking, they're over. Sorry, Napoli, and we're really sorry. Defending champions should be doing better than that, but it happens in football. You can't win them all. Hopefully, I guess, the coaching crisis is what Napoli is dealing with currently right now, because it's a huge coaching crisis, I must say. And Napoli right now, they really need to do much better. Next season, they need to come off stronger. But we just hope the likes of Osimhen won't be leaving. Because we heard that Osimhen, he's wanted by many top clubs in Europe. So we hope that's not going to be a reality. We hope so. But again, what can we actually say, with Napoli, right? Napoli, it's just the coaching crisis. They had to, like I mentioned, they had to change 3 coaches. They've already had a 3rd coach. And I guess it's also the lack of consistency from them, they're definitely not the side that they were last season. And I guess it's all because of the coach. Luciano Spalletti leaving the club has really affected them so much. Yeah, it has really affected them so much. But look, enough about that. Let's go to the other cracking game that we saw between Fiorentina as well as AC Milan. Obviously, AC Milan, emerging victorious by, 2-1 away from home. And it was again the Portuguese Rafael Leao, who scored one, and he assisted another for Ruben Loftus-Cheek. As now AC Milan go 6 points clear in second place, and now Fiorentina also, they pay tribute to Joe Baron, and our condolences once again to the family of the, late director for Fiorentina and the supporters, everybody that's involved with the Fiorentina club. It was actually an emotional evening at, the Stadio Franchi, the first match since the Viola director Joe Baron's death. So the Italo-American was remembered with banners, flags, and minutes of silence, with children releasing white balloons and his jersey, marking, his seat in the stands. And remember, he suffered from a heart attack just before, the planned game with Atalanta. So that fixture had to be called off. Whereas also Nico Gonzalez as well as Christian Pulisic were not 100% fit to actually start following international duties. Plus, Giacomo Bonaventura and Teo Hernandez were suspended. And with Pierre Kalulu, Simon Kier as well as Tommaso, Pobega were also injured as well. But Olivier Giroud only prodded the finish at, the Pietro, Teresiano after Samuel Chikwese's sprint, and then the goalkeeper paired Chikwese's free header at the back post. And from the resulting corner, Teresiano, kept out, Fikayo, Tomori's header. Then Leao was also offside and denied by Andrea Belotti's goal line clearance too. And to say the least, Andrea Belotti, sprung the offside trap. That was one of the first opportunities for Fiorentina. He literally sprung the offside trap, and Jonathan, Ikone, his through pass, and Mike Mignan, rushed out to make a big save. And then on the corner, Ikone drilled just wide. And to say the least, from this particular game, you could say that this game between Fiorentina as well as AC Milan, the game remained wide open. It was pretty much in a balance. We also saw Christian Kouame, making his first start, since returning from international duty with Cote d'Ivoire at the African Cup of Nations. Remember, he also missed out on a couple of games due to the fact that he contracted malaria. And, so to say the least, man, it was the fact that, with Leao, the fact that AC Milan, we saw with Leao, like he tested, Teresiano from the tightest of angles. And he also was able to force another big save, before Giroud balanced his assist over the bar. But, AC Milan, their momentum did pay off eventually. They took the lead, straight after the restart. And it was actually Leao, who ran onto the Chikwese through ball. And, he made a cheeky backheel flick. Roll across, to assist, sending Nikola Milenkovic to the ground and giving Loftus-Cheek time to control and turn it in from 6 yards. I mean, that Rafael Leao is like one of those players that it's like he's enjoying his football, man. He's literally enjoying his football. I mean, what a crazy assist that was. To say the least, I mean, I could watch that assist on many replays, man. That Rafael Leao assist, I could watch it many times on many replays. And however, to say the least, it only took like barely 120 seconds for Fiorentina to equalize. It was actually Alfred Duncan, who gathered from Lucas Beltran and then drilled it into the far bottom corner from the edge of the area. And moments later after that, it was actually 2-1 to AC Milan. And Leao gathered, in the midfield from Tijani, Reinders, and sprinted past Milenkovic and calmly dribbled around, Teresiano to deposit into an empty net. I mean, bruh, let me tell you something. There's no stopping Rafael Leao. When he gets up to speed, there's no stopping Rafael Leao when he gets up to speed. That second half, has just been electric. It has just been electric. He was electric, Rafael Leao. Ikone also stung Magnan's gloves, and Teresiano beat away Alessandro Florenzi's scorcher, but Magnan's save was the toughest on Belotti, using his trailing hand to actually push the strike out of the near top corner. And Magnan also made another fantastic one-handed save on Rolando, and Dragora, his half volley lob, and Christian Pulisic was clearly offside when scoring on the counter attack from a Yunus Munsa assist. But Pulisic also came close in stoppage time, denied by Teresiano at the near post. But it was actually a much needed 3 points for AC Milan. Well worked 3 points, well deserved 3 points for them. And basically AC Milan, they well on contention of, finishing in second place, to say the least, right? Because basically Juventus are way out of it. They're way out of it. I mean, that defeat to Lazio once again has just, has put the final nail in the coffin for their season. And then the big one. Lazio 1, Juventus 0. Look, so, the Bianconeri, I mean, it has just been that season for them. Because, look, even Wojciech Szczesny, he does seem to counter Max Allegri's comments, following that defeat to Lazio. And the fact that, look, Juventus have only got one victory in 9 games. That's just not what Juventus are all about. And I think, Juventus players need to be able to cope with the pressure, because, the Bianconeri, they were beaten by a 1-0 at the Stadio Olimpico by a last grasp, Adam Murisic header, meaning that they've only just accumulated 7 points from their last 9 games in the Serie A. And look, Juventus, a team of their caliber, should see this as a disgrace to the club. They need to really ask themselves serious questions. They really need to train hard. It seems like they do seem like a team that does train hard. They seem that they are hungry for success, but maybe the results are not coming together, which means that Juventus players really need to do better, And what I can also say is that the performance was against Lazio was very decent, I must say, but, they really could have done more. And I don't think they've done enough in the past 2 months. When you look at Juventus's performances in the past 2 months, they've been way below par. And it is something that, look, if a club like Juventus's caliber, if they really want to achieve their objectives, they know that they have to do way better than what they've been producing right now. Because now Juventus have literally plummeted down, to the standings since losing the Scudetto, head-to-head with Inter. And, they could end this weekend 6 points adrift of second place AC Milan. They are still in the Coppa Italia semi-final, with the first leg against Lazio on Tuesday evening. Even though Szczesny cannot share Allegri's positive spin on the situation, because, the Coppa Italia now remains the only remaining trophy for Juventus that they can take home. And they know how important that is, because just like Champions League qualification is important, finishing the season with a bit of silverware is just as important. Because a couple of months ago, I wouldn't have said that it was good enough, season for Juventus, right? Because I'm sure they had the Scudetto dream for 6 or 7 months. They did well in the first part of the season. And then that dream seemed to have faded. They really lost something. It cannot be an excuse for the Bianconeri, once again, because one victory in 9 games is not what Juventus is capable of. That's not the Juventus we know. That's not what Juventus is all about. The caliber of the club, the stature of the club demands more better performances than that. Because Szczesny himself did also note this in the post-match interview that, the Bianconeri, believed a bit too much in the Serie A title, but it seems like they felt deflated. And I can also agree, because if as a team you don't believe in winning the Scudetto, then you cannot play for Juventus. Because everybody must be able to deal with the pressure of playing for Juventus. And that's the best thing that you have in football when you're playing for a club of this kind of stature. And you need to also understand that if you cannot deal with that kind of pressure playing for this club, Juventus, then, you shouldn't be playing for Juventus. You shouldn't be wearing a Juventus jersey. You must be playing five-a-side, type football, right? Because definitely, playing for Juventus is not meant for you if you cannot handle the pressure at all. But, let's just go, apart from Juventus' struggles, right? Let's just go straight into the action of the game between Lazio and Juventus at the Stadio Olimpico. It was a 1-0 victory, like basically the last kick of the game, sealed all 3 points for Lazio. And now it has given, Marusic, like a dream Tudor debut, because Igor Tudor, made a dream debut on the Lazio bench as Adam Marusic snatched a stoppage time winner to consolidate the Juventus crisis. Because look at this, man. Following the resignation of Maurizio Sarri and now Giovanni, Martocchilio's caretaker role to beat Frosinone, Tudor made, his debut win with the revamped 3-man defense. But even Provedel, Manuel Lazzari, as well as Nicolo Rovella, and the suspended Luca Pellegrini, missed out. But with Luis Alberto not at 100%, celebrating his 500 Serie A match, Max Allegri also shook up things with a 4-3-3 formation, as Dusan Vlahovic set out a ban with Milik, Filip Kostic, Alexandro, as well as Carlos Alcaraz injured, which also saw Matteo Di Cilio, returning after 11 months of knee surgery, and then we saw Tati Castellanos twice drilled just wide of the near post, from the edge of the area. And after it was like that type of, play where it's like a give and go, with Felipe Anderson. And then we also saw Pedro's high press, was interrupted by Wojciech Szczesny's pass out from the back. But, Diaki Kamada, took far too long to get the shot away. And Szczesny, also, he had his gloves, stung by Felipe Anderson's half volley at the near post. But the first real chance that Juventus could actually plunder, was in the 41st minute of the game, when Federico Chiesa, tried to steer low finish into the far bottom corner, with the inside of his right boot. And then Christos Mandas, getting his fingertips to it. But to say the least, that Chiesa currently, also tested the goalkeeper. And we saw Allegri decided to actually switch back to a 3-5-2 after the restart with 2 substitutions. And it actually worked well. We saw Samuel Elling Jr.'s, cross found, Andrea Cambiaso at the far post, Tess Mandras, on the volley. And, Adam Marusic, combined with substitute Ciro Immobile for an angle drive, which the winger, saw charged down by, Gelson Bremer to actually go wide. And Luis Alberto also came on late and had an immediate impact, setting up, Mateus Vicino to scarf off target, but, his own strike taking a deflection of Daniele Rugani to actually skim past the far post. And what I can just say is that, when you watch this particular game, right, it seemed, to be a second consecutive 0-0 draw for Juventus. Their third stalemate in a row, but Lazio had other plans. With the last kick of the game, Matteo Guendouzi floated a brilliant ball at the back post for Adam Marusic to actually get there before, Sekulov, and, got to nod in the winner. And now the Bianconeri defense was actually caught napping, sending the home fans wild. It was actually a brilliant assist from Matteo Guendouzi as Lazio, scored a 93rd minute winner against Juventus. That was like the last kick of the game, basically. Oh, yeah. So we're just going to continue with the Serie A, right? And we saw a game between Torino and Monza. And guess what? Torino, the home side, did get all 3 points. It was actually Sanabria scoring from 12 yards. So it was actually Antonio Sanabria who actually converted a penalty to give Torino a precious victory over Monza. Right? So which basically keeps the European hopes alive. Basically now, only 1 point separated these two teams going in, and both were coming off positive results. Kofi Gigi, Ivan Ilicic, and Per Schurz were out of action, while William Bondo was suspended, with Danilo D'Ambrosio and Gianluca Cabrari and Samuele Vignato, not making the trip. Okay, so it was a must-win encounter for either of these two sides. So basically it's 6 points. It's what do you call it? A 6-pointer. When both teams need 3 points, you call it a 6-pointer encounter, which actually makes it a cracking game, right? Which actually makes it become a very highly poised type of encounter. It was actually Daniel Maldini, the AC Milan loanee, whose curler was actually charged down in the box, and then Armando Izos twice made decisive blocks on Duvan Zapata, with Adrian Tameze doing the same on Andrea Colpani, right? Monza were actually just like unlucky to see Colpani's viciously, bending strike deflected just inches off target by Samuele Ricci, while Mikel De Gregorio, right, had to come rushing out to narrow the angle on Duvan Zapata from a long Ricardo Rodriguez pass. But let me just say to you guys that both sides actually threatened with headers. Andrea, Carboni, as well as Alessandro, Buongiorno, right? His efforts testing the goalkeepers, while De Gregorio at full stretch, pushed away the low David Okereke, finish. Whereas, Milan's Juric, header, on a Danny Morta Cavallo cross, like actually schemed the far post. But, from that particular moment in time, Torino were able to receive a penalty, for Matteo Pessina's shirt out, on Samuele Ricci, which was really unnecessary, because there was no danger whatsoever. But I guess the defender then panicked. And luckily, the spot kick was, converted by Antonio Sanabria, right? Basically, this game was just separated by the penalty spot, that one moment from the penalty spot. And that's what's always interesting about these massive 6-pointers, is that it's always that one, point in the game that will always separate the two teams. That will actually always prove to be pivotal in terms of which team will actually emerge victorious. And then we saw moments later, Pessina received the second yellow card for another challenge on Ricci, reducing Monza to 10 men. And then De Gregorio, kept the scoreline down with a flying save on a deflected Duvan Zapata long-range strike. But there was late drama in stoppages. We saw Danny Morta Cavallo and Matteo Lovato both went to kick the ball at the same time in the penalty area. However, the referee waved play on, and then VAR opted not to intervene either, as Monza wanted a spot kick, of their own. So it was defeat for Monza and victory for Torino, right? A very important victory for Torino, which now sees them just like, they're not far off, securing a European spot, basically. And at this particular moment in time of the season, securing 3 points is always massive. You got to keep up with the momentum if you are to achieve your objectives for the next season, And in the other Serie A clash, which took place between Genoa and Frosinone, it was actually like basically a Marazzi stalemate. Reina earned Frosinone like a credible point at Marazzi, but they wanted more against the high-flying Genoa, and there was actually stoppage time penalty drama once again. Okay, and let me just say the G4, remained comfortably mid-table after holding, Juventus to a goalless draw, missing Caleb Ekuban, Aaron Martin, as well as Alan Maduro. Like I would just say, look, just to continue, right? So the Canarini, plummeted into the relegation zone after one win and 3 draws in their last 16 rounds. So it was Anthony, Oyono, Ricardo Marchiza, as well as Abdul Harui, they were on the treatment table. So they were not available for this particular encounter. But let me just say, the hosts actually started like a house on fire. They had a double opportunity in the opening 10 minutes on a corner as the first, the Juan Vasquez header thumped the crossbar. Then Stefano, Sabelli's follow-up from close range was acrobatically palmed away by Stefano Turati. However, from that particular moment in time, Genoa were then awarded a penalty when Albert, Goodmanson surged forward and was actually sandwiched between 2 defenders, Caleb Okoli making the sliding tackle, which was actually considered a foul. And then the Iceland international converted the spot kick himself, low and hard into the near bottom corner. And then Matthias Sule twice got the finish all wrong after a good move, but played a part in the equalizer, sending Nadir Zortea down the right, where the pullback found, Reina unmarked to actually sweep in from 9 yards. And then Frosinone nearly turned in around, completely moments later. It was actually Marco, Bresciani, who he's stinging the gloves of Michel De Gregorio, to actually produce a fine save, And from that particular moment, Matteo Retegui, went off after like spraining his ankle in an accidental, coming together with Okoli. And then Frosinone wanted a penalty for that risky Alessandro, Vogliaco, sliding tackle on, Walid Chadira. And there were actually more problems for Genoa as Ruslan Malinovsky, seemed to actually pull a hamstring, and Junior Messias saw his curler scheme far to the far post. But Sule fired over from a tricky angle after a quick combination down the right. And, it was actually, the game did just deserve a draw because both teams were just not clinical. They were very wasteful in front of goal. And we also saw, Vogliako's, header was just not far off. But, this game really did deserve the draw because, both teams were just not clinical in front of goal, to say the least. But let me just be honest. It was a great game of football, never the least, And let's talk about the latest coaching updates. Roberto De Zerbi. So Liverpool meeting, Bayern talks, and then Brighton offer. Wow, man, let me just explain this particular situation of Roberto De Zerbi. So Roberto De Zerbi, he continues to garner attention from a series of high-profile clubs, across the continent. However, it seems like, the Brighton coach, could have three particular enticing options in the coming months, namely for his current employers as well as from Liverpool as well as Bayern Munich. According to Football is a Religion, right? And De Zerbi, who actually joined Brighton as Graham Potter's successor in September 2022, has a release clause, in his contract, which is believed to actually stand at a sum, close to £14 million, if I'm not mistaken. And remember, the former Sassuolo coach, penned a 4-year deal at the time, which ties him to the Amex Stadium until the summer of 2026. However, after an excellent start to life on the English South Coast, which included, guiding the team to Europa League for the first time in the club's history, and with a series of clubs lining up for De Zerbi's signature, Brighton are actually literally keen on actually extending the current contract. But according to Game Day God magazine, it was said that De Zerbi would ideally like to remain in the Premier League. But that does not necessarily mean that staying on with Brighton is as given, because now there are actually ongoing talks between De Zerbi and Liverpool. And Premier League heavyweight Liverpool are, of course, on the lookout for a new coach, with the current incumbent Jurgen Klopp set to step down at the end of the 2023-2024 campaign. And with their former player and current Bayer Leverkusen boss also running out for now, De Zerbi's stocks have increased even further over the last few days. So, Meroto, right now what I can just say is that, according to Game Day God magazine, is that there was a meeting that took place between Liverpool as well as De Zerbi, in the coming weeks. And which basically, it is, practically a certainty that there will be a meeting between Liverpool, the Reds, as well as De Zerbi. And De Zerbi is reportedly keen to evaluate all the options that come his way, rightfully so. And in order for, to paint a clearer picture of which project will suit him the best, right? There's also been, speculation of talks between him and Bayern Munich. That means that a move away from England is still technically a possibility. Because the Bundesliga giants are also on the list of interested parties. Just like Liverpool, Bayern Munich will also part ways with their current coach Thomas Tuchel at the end of the current season. They too had, been circling around Leverkusen for Xabi Alonso before he announced this week that he would be staying on at the Bay Arena for the 2024-2025 season. So, Game Day God confirms that Bayern and De Zerbi have already had some discussions over the managerial vacancy. But the coach, still has plenty of options, and to weigh up before making his final decisions. What I'm even thinking is that Napoli should actually be in the running for a new manager, especially De Zerbi, a coach of De Zerbi's caliber. Napoli should be looking for that kind of a manager because Napoli haven't been doing so well this season. They have not been doing well. Okay? Napoli haven't been doing well this season. So let me just say this. Napoli should be looking at De Zerbi. But hey, I guess they might not be able to afford him. But we'll see. We'll see. What is actually seeming to be clear, of course, is that I don't think we should actually talk much about it because Inter Milan have already won the lead. They've won the league already. Because the runaway leaders, man, Inter Milan, they they've just continued with their seemingly unstoppable march to the Serie A title. After an early goal from Federico De Marco and a late effort from Alexis Sanchez, basically secured a 2-0 victory, at home against Empoli on Monday evening. So Inter Milan are basically top at the table, with 79 points, 14 ahead of their city rivals AC Milan in second place, with 8 matches left to play. Their sizable lead means that, Inter could potentially clinch the Scudetto during the city derby against AC Milan on April the 22nd. And the result pushed 18th place Empoli into the relegation zone, 11 on points with 25 points, with Frosinone in 17th and 1 point just ahead of Sassuolo, who are in 19th place, right? And let's just say, for the fact that Inter Milan manager Simone Inzaghi, who celebrated his 100th victory with the club, lost his voice during the match, with the assistant coach, Massimiliano Faris, taking over the post-match duties. But what I can just say is that it seems like with Inter Milan, the tactics are really working very well. And the mobility of the defenders is actually proving so much in terms of that. The ability of the midfielders to actually cover those spaces and the defenders going forward. I mean, that is just typical teamwork. And then, let's just say Inter Milan did very well in the second half. And the substitutions also gave them a big hand, in order to bring the result home, confirming the strength and the depth in the squad. And you look at that early goal that was scored by, the runaway leaders. DeMarco was the man who broke the deadlock for Inter Milan in the 6th minute when he fired the ball with his left foot into the bottom corner from the edge of the box. And from that particular moment in time, the rest of the first half, it was embedded. It flowed with Inter Milan, extending their lead. And then Empoli, what we also saw is that the Empoli goalkeeper, Elia Caprel, he actually stood very firm to actually deny Inter Milan and save Empoli from embarrassment. But we did see also a fact that Empoli did start to gain momentum towards the end of the half. They created chances that were just narrowly off target. It was not really they were threatening, but they were just narrowly off target. And you look at the second half, Inter Milan really came back with so much vigor, after the break. And Nicola Barella was inches away from just scoring, after beating 3 Napoli defenders. And the substitute, Alexis Sanchez, was left unmarked, to actually tap in, Denzel Dumfries' cross and double Inter Milan's lead in the 85th minute of the game. It was a great, move of flowing passes, from the hosts. And David Fratesi, almost grabbed the third for Inter Milan with the last kick of the game, but the ball just slipped just past the post. And the next game will be, Inter Milan will be playing against Udinese away on Monday evening, while Empoli are going to be hosting Torino on Saturday. So, yeah, the league is pretty much done, to say the least. It's done, I must say. Yeah, and, in the game between Lecce and Roma, it must actually be noted that Roma were pretty much sluggish and ineffective in that scoreless draw against Lecce, man, to say the least. Because, Roma laid an egg. They were just flat out dominated by a lowly ranked, Lecce in, a rather tense scoreless draw, away from home. And what can actually be noted, is that now that the international break is over, it's actually ride or die time for Daniele De Rossi as well as AS Roma. And with no further breaks in the schedule and the club vying for a spot in the Champions League via the league route, while also facing an incredibly difficult two-legged, tie against AC Milan in the Europa League quarterfinals. I mean, the Giallorossi have no more easy outs. You understand? There's no more easy way out for the team from the capital, because every match matters and the results could potentially shift the balance sheets by millions in the coming season. So what is actually worth noting is the fact that, yes, the club might have suffered a bit, during the international break, losing their striker, Sadar Azmoun. What I can just say, the coach, De Rossi, he had most of his regulars available for the game. Even though the captain, Lorenzo Pellegrini, was suspended for the fixture. As a result, Daniele De Rossi had to throw in some interesting wrinkles into his starting 11, swapping out Pellegrini for Eduardo Bove, while starting Tommaso, Baldassini, Nicola, Zalewski, as well as Romelu Lukaku in attack. And just like when you look at the complexion of the game, after 10 minutes, we only saw that one attempt on goal, and it was actually a scattered shot from Rick, Karsdorp. The absence of Lorenzo Pellegrini as well as Paulo Dybala was actually noticeable, because, With their chief playmakers absent, Roma really struggled to create chances in the final third. Putting the onus, on Baldanzi, who actually fired wide in the 11th minute, curling the ball just outside of the left post. And it was a good look on goal from the young midfielder, but it raised Lukaku's, hackles as he actually pleaded for the ball to be played through the channel. And what I can actually say is that, Lecce, they weren't really exactly carving up, the Giallorossi backline. But thanks to multiple corners, in the opening 15 minutes of the game, the other Giallorossi side looked more likely to open the match. And the home team continued to outwork Roma in the middle of the park, forcing multiple turnovers, one of which nearly produced a goal in the 21st minute. Roberto Piccoli pounced on a loose ball, dashed right towards, Mil Silva's goal, firing narrowly wide of the mark. But I must say it was a pretty below performance from both sides, and as the match really passed the half-hour mark, Roma continued to play passively, relying on lazy back passes or long balls over the top instead of actually taking control of the game. That's one thing that Roma failed to do. They were just not controlling the game. They were not. But this approach almost led to trouble several times, as Lecce, pressed that Roma backline, forcing so many turnovers, and they created so many scoring chances at will. And after 30 minutes of the game, Roma were outshot by 13 goals. Lecce had 13 shots at goal, whereas Roma only had 2. And Lecce actually won 5 corners, and Roma only had 1 corner. So it tells you a lot about AS Roma. Their performance was just really off. It was just unacceptable, man. For a team that wants to play in the Champions League next season, you wouldn't expect that kind of a below par from them. Below par performance from them. And what's even surprising is that the home team, Lecce, they continued to pummel the Roma backline in waning moments of the first half. Swanning any white shirt that dared to touch the ball. And they were able to even maintain that numerical superiority, keeping Roma on the back foot. Piccoli posed a particular challenge for the Roma defense. With the Lecce forward, he was creating multiple chances past the 40th minute. And it was horrendous from AS Roma. They were just lucky not to have lost this game. They were completely outplayed, man. And Roma finally stirred, from their slumber in the final moment of the half, when, Zalewski, coming, excruciatingly, close to actually scoring in the 44th minute, right? And after running onto a looping pass at the left post, Zalewski, attempted to settle the ball, with his foot. And rather than to go for a header, a crouched header at the near post, Angelino then nearly stole a goal with a low free kick that just skirted inches wide of the post. From that particular moment in time, man, I could just say that the match may have seemed like scoreless after 45 minutes, but Lecce was running the show, outshooting Roma. They had 16 shots at goal, whereas Roma only had 5. So something had to give in for Roma. Something literally had to give in. But, you look at the second 45 minutes of the game, the Ivorian, the AFCON winner, Ivan Indika, he picked up a yellow card early in the second half, right? And De Rossi, went to bench he decided to bench him, at the beginning of the second half, bringing in, Dean Huijsen in place of the AFCON winner. And what I can say is that the young Dutch, Spanish defender made an immediate impact, dispossessing Lecce on the flanks, pulling the ball off the touchline and actually springing a counter-attack for Roma. But the Giallorossi, they saw an appeal for a penalty, going ignored in the 54th minute. And, Zalewski was also knocked over the box while attempting to settle, a bounding ball in the box. But the officials weren't entirely buying into it, deeming it incidental contact. But Baldanzi, then saw another effort miss the target later on, firing on off-balance right footer into the stands after being played by Bove, AS Roma, at least now it was a much improved performance, from that dismal first half performance, And with approximately 25 minutes left to play, De Rossi made a pair of attacking changes, swapping out, Bove for Hussein, Awa, as well as Zalewski for Stefan Al-Sharawi, giving the club a pair of experienced hands for the stretch. And the changes actually seem to have, their intended effect. As El Shaarawy and Awa, they teamed up, in the 71st minute to actually create Roma's best chance of the match. Only to see Awa, denied on the doorstep by Vladimiro Falcone. And from that particular moment in time, we saw Roma, they continued to actually surge on, with Lukaku and El Shaarawy pulling off a lovely 1-2 in the area. And then the Belgium effort, he checked his off effort, ball back to the, says at the edge of the area. But, El Shaarawy couldn't actually get enough power behind, to actually trouble Falcone. And, give De Rossi some credit for trying to actually make it through an entire match without Dybala. But he couldn't only last so long, right? Roma, they were seeking a late match winner. But De Rossi had no chance to actually turn, La Joya, bringing Dybala into the fray in the 83rd minute. And in the end, it mattered little, while Dybala soaked up multiple defenders. But it goes to a fact that Roma's lack of fluidity, through the midfield and imprecision in the final third was their own undoing. They failed to dent the Lecce backline, and during the final 7 minutes plus stoppage time. So Roma, they really need to improve. And give credit to, Lecce. Give credit to Lecce, man.